Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Dr. Gustavo Ferrer. He is a board-certified pulmonary disease critical care physician, and he has his offices in Aventura. But we're not going to talk about that. Right now, I'm just going to give you a little interesting note that our book of the month for upcoming June is Graceful Exit by Dr. Ferrer. Now, I don't want you to get nervous about that title because it is a very beautiful book, and it will help so many of you, for us. All of us know that one day we do have to pass away. And yes, it's something we don't usually face, but let me just read something to you. I found this, and I wanted to start off with this before we talk to Dr. Ferrer. There's a Zen tale about a monk who was always known to be happy and laughing, including on his deathbed. As he was dying, his disciples were gathered around him and asked how it was possible that he was still happy and laughing. The monk said, "It is a choice. It is my life. Every morning when I get up, the first thing I decide, before I even open my eyes, is do I want misery or happiness? And it happens that I always choose happiness." So good morning, Dr. Ferrer.
Good morning, Anita. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to talk with you, and I am so proud of you for going in and writing a book like Graceful Exit, How to Advocate Effectively, Take Care of Yourself, and Be Present for the Death of a Loved One. That was quite an undertaking, wasn't it?
It was, Anita. It was, and the book it has been a long process for me because I began to write this book, Anita, over 10 years ago. I began to gather patient stories. I have always done that. When I was in Cuba, in the Orinoco jungles, I like to write, and I kept journaling along and the way and keeping patient stories. And it was about 10 years ago that I realized that it was so much confusion for my patients, their family, and even in my own family then, that I thought that I have to write something like this.
Well, it is unusual for a pulmonologist to jump out of his specialty, but I can understand why you would do that. You have one of the most compassionate attitudes and caring ways. And as I read this book, I wish that I had read this 20 years ago before my family members started passing away, because it would have made it a lot easier for them and for me.
Anita, thank you. And you know, I'm overwhelmed by the receptions of people everywhere we go, because it's truly a difficult topic. And the book was structured in a way that we're basically beginning what I do daily, which is the intensive care unit, and we begin there to tell people that someday, one day, either one of us or our family members or our friends are going to be in that position, being in an intensive care unit, and the confusion is overwhelming. The stress has no limits, and the answers are going to be very few, and they're going to be dripping hour by hour, because that's the nature of being critically ill. But if we do not begin to understand the system and get some ideas about how we as a human respond to this kind of a stress, we then let our emotional intelligence take over or own control of that, and then we create issues and problems, and I have seen so much devastation, Anita, issues and family basically getting destroyed because of the death of somebody or somebody that went through the intensive care unit.
Well, that's what makes this so interesting. Do you know that most doctors don't touch this? It's really sad. I don't know if they don't get it in medical school, but it's kind of like they leave it to the person in hospice. They leave it to the family members. But the way that I read your book, you sit with someone and you go through this whole scenario of what's going to happen and how there can be joy if you do it the right way.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right, Anita. 10 years ago or so, when I finally said to myself that I want to write something like this, I began to do research looking into the different books that are written and what is the standard practice of medicine today, even today. And yes, in med school they touch the topic a little bit, but we don't go into the details. And so I began to do a lot of research, and that was the topic of the presentation that I have. I feel so happy. The reception in the medical community for the book is phenomenal. I spoke about the same topic at Harvard. I came down here to Nova, and I'm going to different colleges. I spoke on Thursday in at a group of doctors and Kendall, and when we talk about it, everybody said exactly what you said. In med school, they taught me a little bit about it, but people didn't go into the details of the whole process. And there is a little bit of history, a short history on that. In America, all the way to 1910, it was very common to speak and talk about end-of-life matters and planning and having your states and whatever you have in order so that you don't create a much problem. The research shows that back between 1808 to 1910, it was kind of extremely common. About 80% of the families spoke about it. Somehow, with the birth of technology and the incredible, wonderful things that we have done in medicine, the conversation took a second place through the 1950s and lately disappear. Doesn't understanding the nature of this problem invaded the med schools, and the med school became kind of a second class talk, and basically the notion of speaking about dying, being critically ill, the system, it is basically was considered by the med schools and doctors as a failure. And we didn't pay much attention, didn't do much research. In the 1980s, there come up few books that start addressing this issue, but they were addressing this from the perspective of the hospice. And then all the way to recently, there are a couple of books that have been speaking about our own mortality and understanding the system. What we did here in Graceful Exit, ANITA, was to focus primarily in helping the caregivers and also the family around any of us, and by that we will be able to help ourselves. So what I put in the book, it is beginning in the intensive care unit. I'm going through the motions of being there and the things that happen today, going into the system, understanding where the insurance cover, what they do not cover. We speak about the financial disaster that can happen to family, friends, and loved ones going through the intensive care unit. What percentage of us will go to nursing homes, skilled nursing facility? What are the rights that we have to pick and choose all of those? Because I realized in my own family, they didn't have any clue. And at some point in my life, I didn't either. So I did a lot of research about it. And as you said in your question, Anita, we were trying not to talk about it. But I can tell you, Anita, I feel so happy today because the last 2 weeks, the receptions by doctors has been fantastic. People really, really want to talk about this.
Well, I know that whatever you do is going to be joyful. I mean, I would say that whenever people ask, what do you mean death is joyful? Well, it's not joyful. It depends how you do this. But I wanted to just reflect a moment that you must have loved how Barbara Bush handled her end of life.
That is absolutely right. I actually had a couple of interviews around that, around her passing. And you're absolutely right. Death is never easy. Losing a family, a friend, of a loved one is never easy. But there is a doctor in 1920 that he wrote that only those that they are ready to die are prepared to leave. And that caught my attention when I read that many years ago. And it came up to the same idea of the quote that you open up our conversation. It is what we're going to be choosing to do. There are things in life that they're not easy, but we need to go through, face them, and plan for them. And when you do that, you take away a lot of stress, and you prepare yourself and your family, and you help decrease the impact of anything or any catastrophe that can come the way. I believe Barbara Butch and Mr. Butch, they have done, and their family, they did an amazing job, and she decided, I'm not going to continue with more treatments. I want to be surrounded by my friends, my loved ones, and this is what I want to do. Research shows, Anita, my book is full of research, and research shows that when we come to that conclusion, when people come to that conclusion, and even years and years before that, the impact in themselves and the family, measured by scales of anxiety and distress, it is so low that it is an amazing experience for the people surrounding you and the family.
Well, what I want to just tell everyone, if you've just tuned in, I'm sorry, I wish you were listening at the very beginning, but you can get this. This will be on YouTube in the next few weeks. But I'm talking with Dr. Gustavo Ferrer. Board-certified pulmonary disease and critical care is his specialty. He does have a wonderful office in Aventura. I'm going to give you his phone number just if you do want a pulmonologist. I have to put that on the side because he is fantastic, and his offices have the latest equipment to help you. His phone number there is 954-482-4747. Again, 954-482-4747. We are discussing his new book, and it's called Graceful Exit: How to Advocate Effectively, Take Care of Yourself, and Be Present for the Death of a Loved One. And Dr. Ferrer has specialized in end-of-life care for more than 15 years, as he's been saying. He has received several prestigious awards, including being named as one of the best doctors in the U.S. by U.S. News and World Report, Most Compassionate Doctor, and Patient's Choice Award. So what we're doing now, though, is we are making this book the book of the month for our June issue. We feel it is so important, and it is a topic that although people don't want to discuss generally, it is important to discuss it and make the end of life easier on the patient as well as the families. So, Dr. Ferrer, for people who you are a pulmonologist, and I'm sure you have been dealing with people who have cancer, and you see that. And what would I know you have so much to say about it, but what would be some wise words to tell them and the family?
Thank you, Anita. Excellent question. I actually was speaking about that on Wednesday morning with a group of people. I would say patients, families, and the people surrounding them, and even the patient. I would tell them first, understand the system. I have dedicated a chapter about that because there is actually confusion even in the medical community. I'm in the process of doing some research about that, and the results are phenomenal. We see that most of the doctors do not understand the relationship between the insurance and the system, and what can we get when we are in the hospital critically ill, debilitated with cancer or with terminal diseases. Do we go to a skilled nursing? Do we go to a rehab? Do we go to what is called long-term care facility? What that thing means? How much will the insurance cover? How much will not cover? I mention that first, Anita, all the time, because that it is the root and the source of many, many distresses in families and patients. Why? Because when they realize that speaking with social workers, which is my second advice, the cost that can be involved in not facing and planning and going through these issues, it could be overwhelming, and it always gets people by surprise. Statistically speaking, we don't see a near solution to this problem, but statistically speaking, ANITA, America, it is the only of the top 10 industrialized countries where patients and family with terminal disease and end of life end up with an enormous amount of debt, their patients or the family, that they were not counting for. Still a big problem. In my book, I go in details explaining people how to understand the system, explaining a little bit about the cost, and how they be able to navigate the system to save financial problems, which it is by far the number one reason for problems that we're facing today in America. Number three, I tell my patients and family, as you said, I, and all of us, we need to choose joy. We need to choose happiness. We need to choose being positive. This is something that it is only we and you, the person, that can be able to do that and will be able to do that. And I said so because my number three advice always is sit with your family, with your friends, and talk about it. Explain what are the things that you would like to understand a little bit better about the process of going into the hospital, being critically ill, and what are your wishes. And in that regard, most people quickly jump into the so-called advance directive or the living will. But I don't go into that much. The living will has a lot of problems, and I explain that in my book. But what I'm talking about is what are the things that you really want to do. Most people think that is for people that have a lot of wealth, that they do the so-called legal document called trust. Well, I will go as far as say that every single person should have something like a trust. And you can find a lawyer and talk to them about it. There are many organizations that they do this for free and will help you understand the process. Number four, ANITA, I always tell patients that find a way to bring back to the table this conversation. And it doesn't have to be a conversation about death. It has to be a conversation about life. Because I always phrase the conversation in terms of legacy. I tell my patients, every single person, every one of us, we have a legacy to pass on. We have a legacy of the things that we want to see our children, grandchildren, friends, and loved ones to leave after we're out of this planet. So I tell my patients, please sit and talk to them and ask them, explain them. And the last one, ANITA, came out of speaking with my mother, my parents, my mom and dad, my children. They came up with the idea, my children, 2 or 3 years ago, they came up with the idea of interviewing my parents. And that was so phenomenal. I learned things that I didn't know that my mom, my dad had done. And they were so proud of that interview. They recorded that. You know, we live in a time that we have so many things that we can do. And we kept the interview, and it's part of our own family now. And it was, my kids go back, and they were 7 or 8 years old, interviewing their grandma, and the questions now have changed. But out of that came the conversation of life and legacy, and it was beautiful, ANITA. It was beautiful. So I always tell my patients, explore your family, explore your own history, explore your legacy. We always have something really, really good that we can pass on. And the last thing that I will say, ANITA, which is part of my crusade, going to medical colleges and speaking to different audiences. America, for the longest, have treated our parents and people that can give us the highest and the largest and the most important pearls of wisdom of this life, we are kind of putting them aside and not engaging our families and elders in the conversation. And I think it is a time to go back and rethink. Again, I for once learned things from my kids interviewing my parents, and I think that is something very, very important.
Those are such wise words. Dr. Ferrer, there is something that I've been working with an elder law attorney, and he's put together, it's called an ethical will. You've probably heard that. Most people don't really understand what that is. It's about time that a person puts on paper who they are and what they want. What they're not just passing on jewelry and money. They should be passing on their wise words and what they've done in their life, and so that their ancestors everyone will understand who they were and what they believe in. And it's called an ethical will.
You are absolutely right. I actually mentioned that in my book, and I'm so happy that you asked that question, Anita. You're not going to believe it. The living will, it was a law created that it has been interpreted different by state, the document that we pass on to our patients. And unfortunately, it is too cutthroat and black and white. Is either or, meaning, do you want resuscitation or not? And has become like a waitress list that we tell the patients that neither the doctor nor the patient get to understand. I'm speaking about the legal living will. Now, I did a research that we're writing the final paper. We interview hundreds of doctors and nurses, and we ask them about the living will and the importance of having the living will. The interesting part of this, Anita, as a summary, 82% of doctors and nurses working in critical care did not understand the details. Now, when I put in 3 questions of the research, details of this coming into the arena, the so-called ethical living will, which I'm very fan of, almost everybody felt that it was a really good idea. And I phrased the question just in the content of what it is, an ethical living will, what people really want to do, why people don't want just a one-way answer of black and white. I don't want resuscitation, I do want this. Because the ethical living will give people the choices to say, you know what, there's a lot of great technologies and I'm healthy. I have patients 90 plus that they are driving and doing excellent, very productive, giving back to society. The people don't want to have a black and white, just one-way solution because technology is there. Medicine has done a lot of good job on that. And the ethical living will allows people to say, you know what, I'm going to name this person my surrogate. And this person knows that as long as I'm doing great and there is good chances of survival, I want to remain capable of, or I want the options of being helped by the medical system. And the other things that are ethical living well, which is the reason I'm very fond of, it goes beyond from the legal document into becoming, Anita, just what you said, becoming a life document. Why? Because you bring to the table the essence of humanity, our emotions, our feelings, and understanding. And just as you said, you can put in there what are the things that you want to pass on to the next generation. What are the pearls of wisdom that you want to pass to people? I spoke recently, Anita, and with a family that I love very, very much. Husband passed away recently. They are from that area over there, north and in Palm Beach area. We have an amazing Graceful Exit with that family. It was really tough. It was in the critical care unit. We helped them navigate those waters. But at the tail end of their lives, Anita came up something that fixed the ethical living well. People were talking about his grandparents being in Germany when the World War to erupted, and he was passing such an incredible pearls of wisdom that he had never told anybody about being Jews and migrating to America and running away from concentration camps. Isn't that amazing that we need to pass that to our family? And that's what the ethical living will does, Anita.
Yes, and I just want to make sure everyone knows if you want to go to a workshop that Dr. Ferrer is giving, it is on Saturday, May the 19th at First Baptist in Weston, and you can register for the workshop. You can get a copy of Dr. Ferrer's book. Go to GustavoFerrerMD.com. That's GUSTAVO Ferrer, FERRERMD.com. And I know that I think I have enough time, and I don't know if you have your book in front of you, but I do. And on page 174, the very last page, I just have to say this, that I think I can read it really quickly. Let me just do it. Death shows us how finite and fragile life is on this earth. When we accept that death is inevitable for ourselves, living with intention and in the present becomes far easier. We're not unconsciously preoccupied with resentments and fears. We're able to open up to the life before to make the most of it now. When we do this, conditions are ripe for a full, authentic life as well as for our own graceful exit. No regrets, no fears, no chaos, just love. Anyway, I'm going to end there, but we'll have you back many more times with this book. And Dr. Ferrer, this has been extraordinary, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. I truly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Bye.